Would a country like the United States start a conflict with China and Russia solely to establish influence over African nations? Africa, long considered less significant, has become a focal point where the U.S. is eager to regain dominance. The continent increasingly leans towards partnerships with China and Russia, with China addressing economic gaps and Russia filling military needs. However, the U.S. is making efforts to insert itself into this. By sending its defense secretary to African nations, the U.S. aims to persuade them to allow it to fill the military void. Despite this looking like a proposal of partnership, there's a concern that this could be a subtle form of exploitation, as the U.S. seeks to use African land for its military objectives. Africa, however, is resistant to such agendas. When did Africa become so important that the U.S. is willing to confront challenges to gain influence over the continent? Let's find out. The increasing proximity of Africa to China and Russia has caused significant concern in the United States. As a result, the U.S. has taken unusual actions, including dispatching secretaries to Africa and urging the region to allow the U.S. to regain military influence, highlighting a strong desire for increased control. But what motivates the United States to seek influence over African nations? The U.S. has sent the Secretary of Defense Lloyd J. Austin to African nations. The U.S. Defense Secretary's recent tour of African nations has stirred global interest and concern. As the top military official in the United States, his presence in Africa raises questions about the intentions and policies that the U.S. is considering for the continent. This visit is not just a diplomatic nicety. It signifies a strategic move that warrants careful analysis. People worldwide are wondering about the purpose of this visit. Why is the U.S. Defense Secretary making the rounds in African countries? What objectives does the United States aim to accomplish in Africa? This visit goes beyond mere diplomatic gestures and photo opportunities. It represents a significant and deliberate action. The United States is carefully plotting something, and it is crucial to discern the nature of these plans. It's not only about what they say, but also about the potential implications of their actions. The military aspect of this visit is a cause for concern for some, given that the Defense Secretary oversees the military. Does his visit indicate that the United States is contemplating military engagements in Africa? This concern is valid, as military actions can have profound consequences, and it's essential to ensure justifiable reasons drive them. The heightened presence of Western leaders in Africa is a response to acknowledging past shortcomings. Western powers have realized that certain policies and decisions made in the past were not beneficial for Africa, and there is a need to rectify these missteps. By actively engaging with African nations, these leaders aim to signal a shift in approach, emphasizing cooperation and mutual benefit. The primary goal of these visits is damage control. Western leaders understand the negative impact of exploitative policies, and they are making a concerted effort to repair relationships. This involves acknowledging mistakes, listening to the concerns of African nations, and working towards solutions that foster shared prosperity. Another critical aspect is the attempt to re-establish alliances. The geopolitical landscape is evolving, and Western powers recognize the importance of having strong alliances in Africa. By engaging in direct dialogues and negotiations, these leaders aim to forge new partnerships and strengthen existing ones. This is not just about rhetoric, but a genuine effort to align interest and collaborate on issues of common concern. Regaining influence in Africa is a key objective for Western leaders. As African nations increasingly diversify their global partnerships, Western powers understand the need to actively participate in shaping the continent's future. This involves economic ties and cooperation on security, technology, and development initiatives. But with what proposal did the U.S. Defense Secretary go to Africa? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Africa's geopolitics, economy, and changing landscape. Let's continue now. The initiatives the U.S. Defense Secretary presented during his visit to Africa have raised concerns on various fronts. The background of these proposals lies in the United States' unease with China and Russia gaining influence in Africa, as China steps into the economic void left by Western nations, and Russia fills the military vacuum created by the U.S. The United States aims to reclaim its position in Africa. However, the suggested strategies may potentially put Africa in a position reminiscent of the colonial era, prompting caution. The central concern driving these proposals is the competition for influence in Africa. The U.S. is uneasy about China's expanding economic presence and Russia's growing military ties on the continent. In response, the U.S. Defense Secretary has outlined plans to regain a foothold in Africa, preventing other nations from filling the void left by the West. China's economic activities in Africa have grown substantially, filling the economic gap left by Western nations. The US, concerned about losing economic influence, seeks to present alternative opportunities that align with its interests. This economic competition is a crucial aspect of the geopolitics between major powers. Similarly, Russia's involvement in Africa's military landscape has heightened tensions. The U.S. Defense Secretary's proposals include strengthening military ties to counterbalance Russia's influence. This competition in the military sphere reflects the broader global power dynamics playing out in the African context. However, the concern arises from the potential consequences of these proposals. While the United States seeks to regain influence, the proposed methods may inadvertently place Africa in a subservience reminiscent of the colonial era. It is essential for African leaders to carefully evaluate the nature and implications of these schemes to safeguard their country's interests and sovereignty. What are the true objectives of the United States in Africa? Is Africa being positioned to serve the interests of the U.S.? The United States is positioning Africa as a subordinate rather than an equal partner. The power dynamics implicit in the statements and actions of the Defense Secretary during his visit prompt apprehension and questions regarding whether the U.S. views African nations as collaborators or subordinates. The key concern revolves around the question of equality and partnerships. The narrative suggests that the United States, through the Defense Secretary's visit, might be unintentionally projecting an unequal relationship with African nations. This raises important questions about the nature of collaboration and whether African nations are perceived as equal contributors to shared goals or as subordinate actors in the global arena. The statements made by the Defense Secretary during the visit play a significant role in shaping this narrative. If the language used implies a hierarchical relationship where Africa is positioned as a subordinate partner, it could have profound implications for the autonomy of African nations. The potential consequences of this perceived power imbalance are substantial. If African nations are viewed as subordinates rather than equal partners, it could be reminiscent of colonial-era power dynamics. This could affect not only diplomatic relations but also economic and strategic partnerships, impacting the ability of African nations to pursue their own interests and development goals. Also, what hidden messages were conveyed? Lloyd J. Austin's speeches, particularly those addressing establishing military bases and deepening African defense relationships, carry hidden messages that require scrutiny. Beyond the explicit content, the hints in his words reveal strategic intentions and shed light on the United States' evolving approach to its military presence on the continent. One key aspect of Austin's speeches involves establishing military bases in Africa. While the explicit message may revolve around enhancing security cooperation and countering emerging threats, the implicit undertones suggest a recalibration of the United States military strategy on the continent. These messages hint at a desire to assert influence and secure strategic interests, possibly in response to the increasing activities of other global players. Should African countries collaborate on security and defense? Critically analyzing such collaboration's potential implications, risks, and benefits becomes critical. This involves assessing whether security deals translate to increased American military bases in Africa, and how these partnerships align with African nations' long-term interests and sovereignty. The central consideration revolves around the potential consequences of entering into security agreements with the United States. A key question arises: does pursuing security deals imply an expanded presence of American military bases in Africa? The implications of hosting such bases involve not only security concerns, but also broader geopolitical ramifications that could impact the autonomy and sovereignty of African nations. Contrasting this notion is the perspective that African nations, instead of prioritizing military bases, are more inclined toward welcoming economic aid and development. This raises fundamental questions about the nature and effectiveness of security-focused collaborations. If the United States genuinely seeks to assist Africa, what purpose does military aid serve, especially when economic aid and business partnerships could address the continent's pressing needs more directly? The emphasis on economic aid and development aligns with the aspirations of many African nations seeking sustainable growth and prosperity. Engaging in business and economic collaborations can foster mutual benefit, addressing societal needs and promoting stability. This encourages reconsidering the role of military aid in the overall assistance framework. Do you think all the U.S. wants to do is to exploit? Will Africa let the U.S. take back military dominance? Why Africa decided to throw the U.S. out in the first place? Let us know in the comments section. Will the U.S.'s dream of controlling Africa ever come true? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: African politics, economy, and increasing power. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.
Tell us what you think in the comment section. Like and share the video, and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our African videos. It's the best way to support us.